The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Today is Friday, December 23rd, 2022. Thank you so much for joining me. We're working this close to the holiday because of all of the serious stories that are happening. The news never stops on the international level, the national level, or on the local level. And one story in particular is connecting all of the dots, specifically what's happening in and around Atlanta, around Cop City. And this week, 6 protesters were arrested on domestic terrorism charges. These were forest defenders, individuals who were camping on public forest lands in tree houses to defend the trees and to defend the forest from being taken over by a $90 million project giveaway to the police in Atlanta, Georgia, brought to us in part by the former mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, who is an amazing black woman, right? And we celebrated her when she won. My daughter wanted to be like her when she grew up. But at the end of the day, this $90 million handout to the cops in the aftermath of George Floyd is something that is not only destructive to nature, but is obviously destructive to black people. All over the country, black people are under siege by policing agencies, by police forces that have no accountability whatsoever. And when the American people, not just black people, but when the American people stood up in the aftermath of George Floyd and demanded reform, they demanded justice, they demanded accountability, what we got instead was 100,000 new troops, cops on the streets, made possible by Joe Biden, along with this $90 million facility made possible by Keisha Lance Bottoms, the Atlanta Police Foundation, the police union in Atlanta, Brian Kemp. It's not just Keisha, it was former Mayor Bottoms, Brian Kemp, obviously, and all of the institutions that benefit off of the torture and the occupied seizure of black communities. They all benefit from this. They were given this handout. We were punished. Black Americans specifically were punished. Now, I don't want to go too far into it because I have an interview this morning with Kamau Franklin, founder of Community Movement Builders, a solid brother that I know from Atlanta who is bringing attention to these 6 protesters who were arrested on domestic terrorism charges. We'll jump into that momentarily, but there are also other stories that we're covering across the country. Our concern and our hearts and our minds are with the people in the South who are experiencing weather conditions like they've never seen, in the negatives all the way across the South. There's an Arctic blast, and this is particularly concerning when you consider what happened in Texas just 2 years ago, when the power grid in Texas, which has been neglected not only by the Republican leadership there, but also by capitalism itself, led to the deaths of several Texans, including children, who froze to death. And so as this Arctic blast comes down, we are concerned about the well-being of people who are not prepared for this type of cold weather. So we're going to keep our eye on that throughout the holidays, as well as all of these other news stories. Let's begin with Kamau Franklin as he explains to us the nature of the charges brought against the 6 forest defenders who were arrested in their protest, their peaceful protest against Cop City in Atlanta, Georgia.
So originally, a few days ago, 5 folks were arrested during the first raid, led by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, along with Atlanta Police Department and the DeKalb County Police Department. They've been working in a task force with federal agencies, including Homeland Security and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, to keep an eye on, harass, disrupt, and stop the movement against Cop City. So a few days ago, they actually raided the encampment. They destroyed all the camping equipment, the makeshift kitchen that was built. They came in shooting rubber bullets at folks who were in tree houses, forcing them to come down. At the time of the arrest, it's really important to note that none of these people were engaged in anything except for what could be termed as civil disobedience by being in the forest. But remember, it's a public forest. So even at that end, these charges are stretched to be kind about them, right? No one was engaged in any other activity which the media has tried to report on and blamed on the forest defenders. Simply, these folks were in the trees, in the encampment, and happened to not get out fast enough or were standing their ground, as you said, and then were forcibly arrested by the police in the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And then the next day, another individual was arrested in a similar fashion. And that's how we wound up with 6 people.
And if I'm not mistaken, these individuals were denied bail, or has that changed? Are they still being denied bail?
At this particular time, they are still being denied bail. The judge, based simply on the district attorney's word of them being charged with domestic terrorism, did not even conduct a proper bail hearing, but simply said because of the charges, he was going to hold them. Since then, we've gotten new attorneys, gotten attorneys for several folks, and there is a new bail hearing scheduled for December 27th. And we hope for better results then as we present basically some of the evidence that was just said to you, that these folks were not engaged in any particular activities. These are folks who are in their 20s. In terms of what a bail hearing is about, they don't have any so-called prior criminal histories. They have connections to the community, so forth and so on. So we see no reason whatsoever to deny them bail, again, except to put a chilling effect on organizing and activism to stop Cop City from happening.
Let's talk about Cop City specifically, because this $90 million facility is the reason why the SWAT team showed up on public forest lands and arrested protesters on domestic terrorism charges. But this seems to be a mighty big coalition of forces that range from the FBI all the way down to the DeKalb County Police, the people who actually executed the warrant. I mean, tell us a little bit more about this coalition and how you all found out about this task force.
Yes, exactly. This task force, we found out about the task force, many folks who are doing organizing several months ago because of documents through a Freedom of Information Act that were released about, a conference that the Atlanta Police Foundation was having, and their strategy, again, to stop the movement against Cop City. And so through those papers, and obviously their very strong connection, them being part of law enforcement, through that paperwork that was released, it was shown that they've been having connections and conversations and basically what seems to be a task force with, again, the Federal Homeland Security, the FBI, and the local agencies that I mentioned, state and local agencies. And so they are pretty solidly going after organizers and activists. And they've been doing this since the beginning, but they've stepped up their tactics. So we should be clear that even doing so-called peaceful marches on the sidewalk very early on in the campaign to stop Cop City, the police have been using violent repressive tactics to detain, harass, and arrest dozens of organizers and activists. It's never reported as violent arrests, but that's what the police have been doing since the beginning. And now they're stepping up their tactics again in coalition with these other forces. So post the George Floyd rebellions, uprisings, when George Floyd was killed, Breonna Taylor was killed here in Atlanta, Rashard Brooks was killed by the police. During that time period when people were pushing back and shouting that the police needed to be defunded, that the police needed to be abolished, that alternatives to policing needed to happen in Atlanta and across the country. Here in Atlanta, the reaction was to give the police a gift. So at no point before that was this really on the agenda in terms of this Cop City. But during that time period, the Atlanta mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, the city council, again, the Atlanta Police Foundation, the police department themselves rallied together to say, let's create this, at the time, over 100-acre facility that will cost over $90 million. $60 million has been raised by the Atlanta Police Foundation. $30 million has been given by the city itself, with the city itself giving access to the through a lease program, access to the forest, I think for approximately 40 or 50 years at $10 a year.
Wow.
So on this training facility, The police will be engaging, we're having a military grade training facility. They're going to have over 12 shooting ranges. They're going to build a mock city to practice urban warfare. There's going to be explosive testing areas. And there's going to be a landing pad for a Black Hawk helicopter. So all of these things, in our estimation, are meant for two reasons. One is to stifle protest and uprisings against the police tactics, against the agency across the country, but particularly here in Atlanta. And two is to continue what we consider the harassment and over-policing of the Black community in general. As noted in some other places, Atlanta has been gentrifying at a record clip. It is no longer a majority Black city. Working class and poor Black folks in particular, but other working class and poor Black folks are being pushed out the city. And more police are here to help continue that push and protect, again, to be honest, the middle class white workers who are coming to the city at the behest of the large corporations, which are bringing their headquarters here. So all of this works together in a way of trying, and lastly, I should say, in a way of trying to change the narrative from when we went from abolish the police to now, where we have both Democrats and Republicans, the political class and the economic class, or the billionaire class, the corporate class, saying not to defund the police, but to fund the police as a rallying cry, to have a narrative of high crime and to push for more police and supporting of the police as a way to deal with issues of public safety. And so all of this is wrapped around why Cop City is being built and how we got on the agenda in the first place to be built.
We're speaking with Brother Kamau Franklin of Community Movement Builders, and he is bringing attention and focus on these 6 protesters, the 6 forest defenders who were arrested at gunpoint by a SWAT team as they sat peacefully on public park property in tree houses, trying to defend that land from the $90 million quote unquote training facility. And I put it in quotation marks, Brother Franklin, because we see the type of things that they are building there. We shouldn't give it a pass, the innocuous pass of being a training facility when they have explosive ranges. They have a helipad for a Black Hawk helicopter. I mean, they have the works going on here. And in order to protect this investment in the police state, the state of Georgia, the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, the DeKalb County Police Department, in a joint task force with the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, have arrested 6 protesters on domestic terrorism charges. We'll have part 2 of this interview with Kamau Franklin a little bit later on in this episode.
Today is the day I'm going to see the body camera footage of my son's death, Jaheim McMillan. I'm nervous. I don't know how I'm going to be able to handle this, but I'm going to watch the video.
That was the voice of Katrina Mateen. She is the mother of Jaheim McMillan, who was murdered by Gulfport Police Department in Mississippi in front of a Family Dollar store, shot in the head as a police officer unloaded, which it appears like he unloaded the entire clip on Jaheim, one bullet striking him in the head, killing him. The body cam footage was promised to be released by the end of the year, and there's only a few days left. The mother, Katrina Mateen, was able to view the video, and this is information that I'm receiving from organizers there on the ground, and according to them, it confirms what we already knew, that Jaheim McMillan did not have a weapon of any type, and that his hands were up. We're waiting on that video to be released to the public. The Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, or whoever has this video, because it's no longer up to the Gulfport Police Department to release it, but it is up to the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations to release this video to the public. And I understand their technique, what they have mastered, the police across this country have mastered. They've mastered the art of killing us without inciting a response from us by silencing the video as long as they possibly could, by making sure that the public isn't aware of what they are doing to us. If we don't see it, then it's hard for the people to mount a protest. And that's just one way of making sure that the public doesn't respond. While I spent about 2.5, maybe 3 weeks, I lost track of time a little bit while I was there in Gulfport, in Mississippi. The other technique that I noticed that they were using, the Gulfport Police Department in conjunction with Facebook and Meta, they were individually targeting the family members of Jaheim McMillan with temporary bans and suspensions, the inability to go live or to post or to stream from their Facebook accounts. The mother's account was suspended. The sister of Jaheim McMillan, her account was suspended. All of the organizers that were involved, other family members, everyone compared notes and saw that they had been specifically targeted by Facebook. And one has to conclude that it is with the assistance of the Gulfport Police Department in silencing their ability to get the word out. Now, I'm doing this story because, one, things that are happening in Mississippi are so dark and so malevolent that I don't think people will really understand the level of murder that the state of Mississippi is able to get away with, not only from the police department, the various police agencies across the state, but just ye old random white person. The ability to kill black people with impunity is almost to a nightmare level. Later on this month, or perhaps after the new year, I'll be speaking with one of the lead organizers there, Brother Marquel Bridges, who really gives the account as he goes story by story of all the different investigations that he and his team, they have initiated into police murder of black lives. And as you listen to story after story after story, where police have been able to kill with impunity, not only one generation, but in multiple generations, killing mothers and sons separately, killing uncles. In this case, the uncle of Jaheim McMillan was also killed by the police in Gulfport, Mississippi. And when you consider the level of malevolent targeting that the black citizens of Mississippi go through, you really have to see it through the lens of a horror movie, a racist horror movie that's taken place in Mississippi. Now, mind you, this is happening across the country, but the intensity in Mississippi is something unique. And so as I listened to the voice of Jaheim McMillan's mother, Katrina Mateen, I mean, quite honestly, that's when I heard her cry when they initially killed her son back in October, when they killed him, and she was on the internet wailing, just pouring her heart out, mourning the murder of her son. That's what made me get up and drive over to Mississippi. And listening to her this morning as she gets ready, or she did yesterday, watch the body cam footage. We're waiting still to see that body cam footage because we understand that justice is inextricably linked with our ability to see and witness what is going on. And so we're going to keep our eye there. We're going to keep focused on Gulfport, Mississippi, along with all of the other instances across this country. Here's one thing, and I got a chance to talk with Brother Kamau Franklin about this, is that the system is uniquely designed, perfectly tuned to crush dissent. Now, they would not have dissent to crush if they would stop killing us. They would not have dissent to crush if they would stop exploiting us. They would not have dissent to crush if this system was not actively dependent on the exploitation and the cruelty towards black people specifically, but all marginalized groups and certainly all impoverished people across this country and across this globe. We would not have to protest if they didn't make the protest necessary. And in response to our protest, the policing agencies and the politicians have mastered the art of preventing critical mass. They know how to keep the masses from responding. And so long as they can keep the masses from responding, they can keep getting away with murder while still getting promotions, while still getting raises, while still getting 100,000 new troops, thanks Joe Biden, while still giving $90 million to a training facility in Atlanta,
when it is already extremely difficult for black people to exist in Atlanta, not just because of gentrification, but because we have a lot of black folks who side with these institutions, who give these policing agencies what they want, who give these real estate developers what they want. And what they want is the exploitation and the displacement of poor black people. It's literally a part of their business model. So everything that we're facing across this country, whether it be an individual case of police violence against black lives or the gentrification of entire communities, I don't care if it's for a Whole Foods, a Starbucks, or a police training facility, they are all inextricably linked. But so long as this police state is able to keep us in our individual silos, not realizing what happened to Jaheim McMillan is happening to somebody else's child in Georgia, in Minneapolis, in Louisiana, in California. I don't care how blue or how red your state is. This is happening in your state. And so it is incumbent upon us to find ways to stay connected, despite the fact that the police state has mastered social media. They've mastered the algorithm. They have the ability to silence our dissent. And they know all they have to do is to hold off releasing body cam footage, if they ever release it, but hold off releasing it long enough to make sure that the masses of people have turned their direction. They're no longer paying attention. And maybe they're hoping that black people won't get so upset when they see this body cam footage. But I think time is up. Time is up on us being desensitized to what kind of violence, the type of violence that they're bringing down on black life. And I'm telling you, white folks who are in the audience listening, you should know by now what they have perfected first in the black community
is sure as hell coming to your community if it hasn't already reached it.
Welcome back to the Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Part 2 of the interview with Kamau Franklin, because we're coming up at the 30-minute mark here soon, and I want to cover one more story. Part 2 of the interview with Kamau Franklin, where we dig into strategies. We're going to dig into strategies of how we fight back against this police state that is well funded, and it is in perfect sync with not only the political class of both parties. Let's keep it 100. The police state serves both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. That's not a controversial statement, and if it hurts someone's feelings for us to call out the Democratic Party in this regard, then I think you should take a step back and really analyze what happens when protest takes place in Democratic cities. They're in perfect lockstep. The police state is in perfect lockstep with the political class as well as the economic class. And we're going to discuss that with Kamau Franklin in the patrons only portion, patreon.com/the BPD show. I want to turn our attention to a clip from CNBC about the nature and the condition of our economy that was clipped by a senior writer at Gizmodo by the name of Robert Novak. I follow him on Twitter. Now, he brought this to all of our attention, and I want to provide some commentary on it. The clip is of a hedge fund portfolio manager by the name of Jackie Kavanaugh. She is a part of Putnam Investments portfolio. And in the clip, it really outlines the tension, the inherent contradiction, the inherent struggle between you keeping a few pennies in your bank account and corporate America's, the vulture capitalists' desire and need to get your last penny out of you. Now, when I've discussed this before on the show, I discuss it in context of the economic theories that we're taught on the undergraduate level, right? These are the basic introductory courses to economics teach you the theory of the last dollar, right? Especially microeconomics. They teach you the theory of the last dollar. How do you triangulate your product to get your customers' last dollar. Now, it's all theoretical when you're doing it in college, but in real life, these corporations, these investment houses, Wall Street, they are all committed to taking your last penny. Listen to Jackie Kavanaugh of Putnam Investment Portfolio.
The consumer is just really still very strong. They have cash balances at the banks that are 30% above where they were pre-pandemic. Even when you look at the lower income cohorts, they're still 12 to 15% above where they were pre-pandemic. So they have cash to spend. They've certainly demonstrated a desire to spend. We're seeing that. What they're spending on is changing, and they're moving more to experiences than goods, but they're spending, and they have confidence to spend because the jobs market is about as good as we've seen in the last 40 or 50 years. So they have a job and they have confidence that they can get another job if they need to. So that's a really tough nut for the Fed to crack when the U.S. consumer is 70% of the economy.
You would think that there is something intrinsically at odds between consumers, workers, and the economy. Because as she describes this dire situation for the economy, for the Fed to crack this nut, this situation of consumers actually having money left over and consumers changing what they're spending on from goods to experiences. And when your economy is 70% dependent on consumption, then you have to understand that at the end of the day, everything from Wall Street down to your local grocery store is expressly designed to take from you everything it can possibly take. This is why we're living in an age of quote unquote inflation that is actually nothing more than corporate greed. If they can raise the prices, they will. Why? Because their goal is to get your last dollar. They don't want you to have cash balance, especially, you see how she identified, I'll play it again. She identified not just your average American who has 30% higher cash balances in their accounts, because they don't want you to have, no, this economy needs you to spend that money. And when you spend that money and you have nothing left over, don't forget that they have overdraft fees waiting. They've created an economy out of overdraft fees. And so the stores need you to spend everything that you have, and the banks need you to go into the overdraft so that everyone can make money, not all for your prosperity, but out of your despair. Listen to her describe it.
Even when you look at the lower income cohorts, they're still 12 to 15% above where they were pre-pandemic. So they have cash to spend.
Yeah. I mean, most of us are trying to spend that cash on just surviving, on living. The cost of living has gone up. The cost of everything has gone up. And despite the cost of everything going up, people are spending less. This was one of the most revolutionary aspects of COVID-19. And this is why there was a full court press to make sure that people went back to the workforce, back to the office, not just back to the workforce, but they had to make sure that you left your home and went into the office. Because so much of this economy is built on taking every dime that you spend, going from your house to your job, all of the consumption that occurs, all of the excess spending that occurs versus when you were working from home, all you had to do was go to your kitchen and make a sandwich. Now they understand what kind of threat that type of freedom poses to their bottom line. In fact, they understood right away, which is why you had Donald Trump's top economic advisor, Peter Navarro, at the beginning of the pandemic, insisting that people just, maybe throw on a mask and go back to school. This isn't as bad as the flu. There were so many people committed to ensuring that we never successfully shut down from COVID-19, not because they truly believed that there wasn't a pandemic. They knew we were underneath a pandemic. They knew a lot of people were going to die. But they also knew that if Americans ever had time, it doesn't take a long time to change your habits. But if Americans ever had like 2 months to actually sit still at home and see not only how much life is better by not being stuck in this rat race, but how much money they saved by simply not going out. That in and of itself was a revolutionary threat to this economic system. And this clip, while it's not, it's not ground shaking, I think it's very clear. It's very clear that you as a consumer, I don't care how much you make, you are a part of this consumption economy. And unless you are a billionaire who lives off of capital gains, you are labor. You as labor and you as a consumer are targeted for the fullest exploitation imaginable. Okay, listen, we're coming up at the end of the show. We're already over 30 minutes for the public show, but I want to make sure that before we go to the patrons only portion, where we're going to finish the interview with Brother Kamau Franklin, I want to make sure that you have the access to the links and the resources that we are asking everyone to engage in order to support the 6 protesters who were arrested on domestic terrorism charges. I'm going to play a portion of the interview where Brother Franklin from Kamau Franklin from Community Movement Builders outlines the very specific steps that each of us can take. And above all else, this is what we need you to do. You may not be able to donate money. You may not be able to join organizations. You may not be able to do a lot because of whatever you have going on in your life. But he outlined some very specific tasks that we can take in order to help these 6 forest defenders who were arrested on domestic terrorism charges. This is what we could do to help them out.
The 2 things that 3 things that we're asking for at this particular time is, one, if folks have any extra resources that they can donate at the atlsolidarity.org, atlsolidarity.org, and that's basically the Atlanta Solidarity Fund. That's where bail money is being raised and money for attorneys is being raised. So again, atlsolidarity.org. That's very important. We're also asking folks to give a call to the district attorney, who is a Black woman named Sherry Boston. She's the DeKalb County district attorney and the lead attorney on this case. Her number is 404-371-2561. That's 404-371-2561. Again, Black woman, representation politics. She's held up as one of only 3 elite prosecutors. She is the lead prosecutor on this case. We need to call her and tell her to drop the charges. And the last thing we're asking for is the solidarity across the country. Folks have been doing banner drops. They've been doing gatherings and workshops. So we need that kind of spirit and energy to continue. Those are the things that we think will not only help set the stage to free the 6 defendants who we consider to be political prisoners at this particular stage, but will also put far more pressure on the city, on the county, and on the state around stopping the building of Cop City.
That's Brother Kamau Franklin on how you, the listener, can help the 6 forest defenders who were arrested on domestic terrorism charges. That's atlsolidarity.org, or call Sherry Boston and leave a kind message to drop the charges, 404-371-2561. The rest of the interview is coming up right after this break for patrons only. Everyone else, go to patreon.com/the BPD show to get access to that, as well as access to the the holiday patron party that's going down tonight. We want to make sure that you're in the place, patreon.com/the BPD show. But if you don't do anything else, atlsolidarity.org. Let's help out these forest defenders. Stay tuned, patrons. Everyone else, we'll see you next week.